Hello everyone, welcome to my review of Hyper Demon, the sequel to one of my favorite FPS games of all time, Devil Daggers. This bad boy came out last year in 2022, and I have had the game since its release date, but rather than rushing out a review, I decided to take my time on this one and sort of let myself digest what is going on, because Hyper Demon is one of those rare cases of an original idea, of something we have not seen before. This is not a remake, and even with brand new indie titles, it's not just an homage to games of the past and, oh, do you remember playing this on the Super Nintendo? Oh, isn't that cool? No. Hyper Demon has that treasure spirit. It is doing something bold and innovative, and for that alone, it gets my respect. But not only is it original, but it is also excellent and truly well made. It is the type of game that gives me hope for the future, and I really hope it finds a crossover audience with sort of the normal mainstream crowd. It does seem to have a big player base, because every time I fire it up, there's a bunch of people playing it, which is really impressive for an indie title. Because if you look at the Steam charts for most shmups, for example, it's like 1 player a month, 4 players a month. You know, they're very, very low. This bad boy does have a lot of activity, and so I would love to see it hit a more mainstream audience. And out of curiosity, I went ahead and looked up the Game Awards of 2022. I knew it didn't win anything, but I was like, I wonder if it was nominated for one of the FPS of the year. Well, turns out Game Awards, they do have a Mobile Game of the Year award, so that's good, but they don't have an FPS category for some reason. Probably the most popular gaming genre of all time, they don't have a category for. Oh my god. But anyway, with this review, I don't want to just sit and say, oh yeah, it's a excellent game, you should buy it, and oh man, it's all trippy, it reminds me of being on acid or whatever. I want to actually explain why Hyper Demon is as good as it is. So let's begin by talking about the most commented on aspect of the game, which are its graphics and visual style. And I will say, when I first saw the trailer for Hyper Demon, I fell in love. I was absolutely relieved and very happy to see the direction they went in, because I was afraid, being a Devil Daggers fan, what the sequel to that game would look like, because I am a huge fan of that game's style, which was like early Blizzard, PS1, razor sharp, dirty, gritty polygons. What often happens is when you have a game in this style and then they go for something a little bit more commercial or high resolution in the sequel, what you end up with is cartoony Pixar bullshit. I'm thinking of the transition from StarCraft Brood War to StarCraft 2. I remember when StarCraft 2 came out, I was so annoyed with the graphics of that game and how lame they looked that I actually went around on the internet trying to find a mod to mod back in the StarCraft Brood War graphics. I never did end up finding that, and I also felt like StarCraft Brood War was just better gameplay anyway. But there was a period there where I just couldn't stand how generic and lame StarCraft 2's graphics looked, but I was very afraid that's what we'd see with Hyper Demon. But no. This game absolutely delivered something fresh and updated, but also still gritty and visceral and ugly and beautiful at the same time. I'm a huge fan of this game's art style, and actually did end up interviewing the developer a little bit just out of curiosity. Okay, where did you come up with this? Because this isn't a style that a committee would come up with. This is an artistic vision, clearly. And the guy said the style actually came from his dreams. He dreamed what the game would look like and then tried to recreate that, and did a lot of experimentation and just trying out different physics and all that sort of stuff. A little bit beyond my understanding. But the graphical style of this game really evolved and was created and formed, rather than just sort of prescribed and dumped in like we often see with games graphics these days. So visually, I cannot be happier with how the game turned out. And I know a lot of people are saying, oh, it's all trippy and drugged out, and if you start playing it for long periods of time, you'll
be on LSD or something, but that's actually not the case. As you
play and get understanding how the game's mechanics work and how the level design works and how the enemies work and all the different techniques and items you can use, that actually makes a lot of sense. And then it becomes really cool and really fun and entertaining to watch the high level replays, because you're seeing, oh my god, he's pulling this off, he's pulling that off. And so you can see the skill and technique in the game, and the visuals really emphasize that. You can visually tell the difference between a really good player in the game and a newer player, because the really good player is causing all these crazy effects and warps and bouncing off things and charges, and it's just blowing your mind the way the game looks, and you don't quite understand what's happening. But not only does it have this sort of over-the-top, really saturated psychedelic sort of stuff going on, it also has this darker, creepier vibe as well. Like, the ground is both solid and yet liquid at the same time, and things will bounce off it and you'll see waves, and yet you're walking on it. It's very trippy and sort of like Dante's Inferno or something. I don't know how to put this exactly into words, but I love the way this game looks. It's probably one of my favorite looking 3D games ever made. And so that's a real selling point for me right away. But on top of that, of course, we need to talk about the gameplay and the level design. So the way Devil Daggers works in concept is actually very simple if you are a shmup fan, because what this game is the ultimate Caravan mode. It is all about the faster you kill things, the faster the level progresses, but the more the level progresses, the higher the rank rises. So if you're a shmup player, if you're an arcade player, these concepts are going to be right up your alley, and you're going to absolutely love it. It's like, oh my god, why don't more shooters do stuff like this? And so I really like the essential concept of playing the game, and the more you play your game, the faster it goes, and the faster it goes, the harder it gets, but also the more fun it gets. But there's a real balance to this that the game strikes, because what can happen, and what I was afraid of, is it has this really slow, boring start, and then 10 minutes in, then it gets exciting. So I talk a lot about gameplay density here on the channel, and I don't think any game quite epitomizes this concept as much as Hyper Demon. It's taking an entire arcade run and compressing it into this ultra tight ball, and the better you are, the faster you get to the core. It would be like if you played Battle Garega, and rather than just the rank rising, like the game would go faster too. I think there are some shmups kind of like this, but imagine you're playing Garega, and the more you're scoring and stuff, like the game just starts to speed up, and like more enemies start flying and bosses just start showing up, and so that you're packing the entire game into like 2 stages. It is something a little bit like that, but I know one concern I had coming into it, which was, well, where does the incentive come from then? Because in a weird way, it almost feels kind of punishing that the better you are, the faster the game goes by, right? It almost feels like the Devil Daggers formula, it's the reverse. Devil Daggers, the better you are, the longer the game goes on. But I actually think the Hyper Demon model works better in the long run. And the reason for that is because if you're a newer player to this game, you are not getting to the end. I was reading reviews for this. I doubt any of those reviewers actually made it to the end. I've been playing this game for hours and hours and hours practicing. I still haven't made it to the end. It's because it's very difficult and very challenging and very mechanically complex. And so getting through the game one time and getting to the ending is like, that's an achievement, and that's probably going to take you 10 or 20 hours of practice. Maybe if you're really good at FPS, maybe that's less. But for me, I'm not an amazing FPS player, so I could see myself needing to do another 10 or 20 hours to get to the end of the game. And then once you get to the end of the game, you realize there is still a long way to go. Because when you watch those high-scoring replays, I mean, the type of shit those guys are pulling off is insane. And that's why it doesn't even make sense to you when you watch those replays. So don't worry about the game being too compressed. It's actually more forgiving than Devil Daggers in a way, because if you're just trying to learn and get into it, it kind of takes you along at your own pace, and you actually have longer runs than in Devil Daggers if you're sort of first learning it. The trick, though, and why I think a lot of new players are going to struggle with Hyper Demon at first, and that's why I want to cover this in the review, is because the game is much more complex than Devil Daggers. So if you don't know what's going on, you're just going to get owned immediately. But it's also a really beautiful evolution of the Devil Daggers formula, where it's bringing in all these new mechanics that now you kind of can't live without. Like, you go back to play Devil Daggers, you're like, oh, where's my air dashes? Where's all these cool different movements and bounces and my laser and, yeah, the way the upgrade system works? Like, I just think all that's more refined and better in Hyper Demon. There's going to be a bit of a learning curve for the Devil Daggers players, but once you get into it, I think most of us will agree that Hyper Demon is the better of the two games. So I also want to explain how the game works a little bit, because it's actually very difficult to comment on the game's level design without explaining how the game works, because it's so unique. So in Hyper Demon, you have your shot, you have your shotgun blast like you did in Devil Daggers, but now you also have this sort of laser mechanic that comes into as well. When you kill enemies, these diamonds come out, And you have two choices. You can either absorb the diamonds, which will power up your main shot and power up your shotgun blast, or you can absorb the diamonds and release them as these purple lasers. And so the way it works is kind of survival versus scoring. So when you're first getting the game, I actually recommend just absorbing them and upgrading your main shot power, because that's going to help you survive longer. But as you get better at the game, you're going to start to do the tactical lasers, because if you're placing them in the right places, if you're hitting the things, you're getting faster kills, which is getting you more diamonds, which is getting you more lasers, which is getting you more power-ups. And so it builds on this self in this really cool exponential sort of way. And you'll actually see that when you're doing the scoring runs. So rather than going from like this slow grind forward like in Devil Daggers, that's kind of how my experience has been in Devil Daggers, where you get 1 second further, and then 2 seconds further, and then 3 seconds further, which is cool. Hyper Demon is a little bit more exponential, where you just like increase your score 30% in a really good run, and then you have to kind of work your way back up to that. Like the peaks run higher because it has this mechanism of exponential growth with the way the power-up system works. So it's really, really cool. And then on top of that, also brings in these items, these power-up items, and again, very similar. So if you just pick up the item, usually what you'll get is like this really juicy slow-mo sequence where you can kill all the things that are about to kill you, it powers you up, really boosts your survival. But if you absorb the item, you can blast into the air and like launch this big laser rain on people, blowing up a bunch of enemies, collecting more diamonds, and progressing the stage faster. And so in all the high scoring replays, this is what you're going to be seeing. You're going to see the players collecting all these items and blasting them off in just the right ways. And it's really a lot of precise routing. It's not just randomly shooting things. And so talking about raining lasers down from the air, the next aspect of this game that I want to talk about are the movement mechanics. Now, when you first start playing, especially if you're a Devil Daggers player, you're kind of be like, what is this bullshit? Like, this seems complicated. This seems unnecessary. But you'll find like immediately it's important. It's not just, oh, you know, maybe when you get really good, it's important. No, like immediately understanding the movement system is important. So I think one thing you need to do is you need to go into the training mode. With a game this unique, there's really no other way. You need to go into the training mode and you need to go through the little tutorials of how the stuff works. You don't have to, you can just go right into the mode, but I'm telling you, this information is actually really, really useful and important. So go through it and understand it, because until I did that, you know, I just tried to blind play the game. I was like, what the hell is going on? But when you go through the tutorial mode and you start understanding how the different mechanics work, how the movement works, how the power-ups work, how the enemies work as well, because all the enemies have very unique AI this time around, and learning to activate and manipulate that AI is a big part of the game. Yeah, it's all going to come together. You do need that bit of information though. But what's really, really cool is that this game has a lot of air-based mechanics to it. So you have a jump, but you also have like an air dash. Then you can also double bounce off the ground, and gravity is a little bit more generous this time around as far as letting you float around. And you can do all kinds of crazy in the air if you combine your shots with your movement. For example, well, there's two enemy types that you can bounce off of. So one of them is this spawner, very similar to the spawners in Devil Daggers, that opens. And if you dash into the diamond as you opened it, you absorb the diamond and you'll fly through it, killing the enemy. And you can kind of link those together, and you'll see the top players doing this. But the timing and precision is very, very tight to do this. And then another thing is there's these sort of centipede squid looking things. It's hard to explain what they look like. But when you shoot them, they turn purple. And they actually won't die until you shoot them while they're purple. Or if you run into them, you can bounce off them. So you can do this really cool aerial combat in the game where you shoot these things, turn them purple, bounce off them, and then keep doing it, bouncing off a bunch of them, sort of Mario RPG style or something. Yeah, the enemy types, the movement, it's just all really next level on top of what you could do in Devil Daggers. It makes the game incredibly addictive. Once you understand it, it has that sort of initial learning curve of, okay, what the hell is going on? But once you get it, holy crap, it is incredibly addictive. I sat and played this game for 6 hours straight, just chasing the scores. And it's also really, really fun because the scoreboard at this point is really populated. And climbing your way up the ladder, it's just so gratifying. It actually has this cool mechanic now where when you get a point increase, It has like this slow sort of tick upward showing you, oh, this is how many people you beat. Here's your friends. It'll show you if you beat your friends. Like, aha, here's your friends. You beat them. It's really cool. And of course, you can download replays, watch them. It also has an anti-cheat. Now, I didn't purposely activate it, but I play the game what I call dual mode. So I have a controller in my left hand where I do the analog stick and shoulder button for my movement and jump. And then I aim with the mouse, because just aiming with mouse is way better than using the analog stick. So I aim with the mouse, but I move around and jump with the controller. So I got kind of this dual thing going on. Actually, it's very, very cool. If you're a pad player, I say you need to do that, because this game requires a lot of precision aiming, and it can get pretty taxing. And I just don't think pads can quite keep up with it. Of course, keyboard players, no big deal there. But if you're a pad player, I always recommend doing the dual control for a game like this, because you need that extra aim and precision. It matters, not only for shooting shit, but also actually moving around the screen. And so what do you end up with when everything comes together with Devil Daggers? Well, you have a game with a lot of replayability, obviously, but in a very condensed and fun manner. And the game gets going immediately. It is the most compact, tight first-person shooter I've ever seen. Then on top of that, you have this real mechanical depth and complexity and these amazing visuals. It's just the entire package. I think the one thing that would really be cool to add to the game, though, would be if they added in a survival Devil Daggers style mode. So you have the main Hyper Demon mode, but then you have like an arrange or like a DLC where you could play like Devil Daggers style survival. I really love the Hyper Demon mode, and I don't particularly have a criticism of it. It's more of a suggestion, just because they're doing so much with these brilliant mechanics and enemy design and graphics, of course. I just think it would be awesome if there's a little bit more there in terms of having a survival mode as well, so you can kind of get both slices of the pie. That way you can also bring over the Devil Daggers survival mode style as well. You can have both styles, but with the updated mechanics. I think that would be a really cool DLC or whatever. So overall, I think this is a big winner. This is one of my favorite FPS games of all time, if not my favorite FPS game of all time. A real solid sequel, which is not easy to follow up on. I can't recommend it enough. Huge fan. Adios, everyone. So thank you to the $5 patrons: 100, Accepting Panda, Dingo, Another Joe, Anthony A, Aaron Solis, Arrow Viper, Bo, Ben, Blur STG, Borgie22, Brian Shiver, Chase Palumbo, Shadow Maltese, Chris Yusufovich, Chronic Burnout 3, Clammy Coyote, Coast, Cook Some Soup, Corey Mark, Des Audio, Donchi, Darren Griffin, Delta Tango 6, Disco Stas Leia, DJ 420 Praise It, Eric H, Fanticide, FCK, Francisco, Full Set, Retro Shmupper, Hausu, Jake Ryan, JLab, JB RPG, John Kelly, Gameboy Guru, K, K2, KZ, Khalil Reedy, Contain, K Horse, The Goddamn Milkman, Larridge, Malaise, Maz, Megadeth 859, Manung, Mechalin, Michael Stum, Mitch LY, Queen Charlene, Nathaniel Davis, Neon Dagger Games, Oakla Googles, Psycho Blizzard, Rattlecat, Raul, Real Skeen, Riff Mason, Rolf015, Sarah, Scanline City, Seesaw SDG, Shmup Junkie, Sirapong, Steve Fiction, Superfunk, Takiro Mucho, The Brute Rex, The Dirty Screech, The N1, The Old Bensta, TRM, Sugumo, Tuiyu, Twilight EX, Unikoi Roots, Vic Viper, Waggy Legs, Boghog, and Utakaya. Thanks for watching.